In calisthenics, some injuries are so common they might as well be part of the sport. But that also means they become predictable, and if you know how to handle them, preventable. My name's Jacob, I'm a calisthenics champion and expert, and today we'll go over the top injuries and how to avoid them. Let's get straight into it. Elbow pain tends to be worse during pulling exercises, but if it's serious, you'll feel it in every workout, doing dips, handstands or other movements. Broadly speaking, it happens from one of two reasons, and both are related to the pull-up. The first one comes from pulling with a wristband, especially the semi-false grip where the knuckles are pointing to the ceiling. Most people add a wristband intuitively because it's the stronger option. It shortens the level of the arm and engages more muscles in the forearm, either allowing you to lift more weight or do more reps. But the downside is that the force no longer travels cleanly through the arm and it ends up accumulating in the elbow joint, especially on the inside. Now, the fix is simple, but you may not like to hear it. It is to keep a neutral wrist position where the back of your hand aligns with the forearm. This is mechanically weaker, but have the benefit of being easier on your elbows. I personally use the semi-false grip in my heavy working sets and then switch to a regular grip afterwards for all the remaining volume. This approach is more sustainable for preventing pain, but if you're already feeling it, you might benefit from switching completely, at least for a period. The second reason happens because your wrists are locked in place as soon as you grab the bar. This restricts your wrists from rotating and, as I often mention, creates a slight mismatch between how your arms want to move and how the bar forces them to move. For example, in the top position, your arms naturally want to rotate inwards, but since they can't, twisting forces build up. Even with good technique, it's pretty common to experience irritation. But there is a way to keep training while also letting your elbows recover. And that's ring pull-ups. Here the equipment adapts to your body, not the other way around. So you can fluently switch from a pronated to a more neutral or even supinated position, for many resulting in no more elbow pain. I'll also mention that compression sleeves definitely help as well. They keep you warm and let you train with less discomfort. The ones I'm using here are from Carnation. In calisthenics, the wrist is repeatedly bent under pressure. That's why most athletes have experienced pain and irritation at some point. And while it's usually not the most serious injury, it can be incredibly frustrating and persistent. Fortunately, there are a few things you can do to avoid it. First and most importantly, wrist wraps. A simple piece of equipment that provides compression and stabilizes the joint. This immediately reduces the load on your tendons and ligaments, which makes a huge difference for training with less discomfort. Secondly, we can also make adjustments to our wrist position. In dips, for example, many make the mistake of bending the wrist excessively. A more sustainable option is the neutral wrist position, where the hand is aligned with the forearm, almost like an extension of the arm. To do this, place your thumb in the middle of the P-bar, keep that wrist placement, and then wrap your thumb around the bar. This is not only safer, but also stronger, as the force can travel more effectively through the forearms and into the bars. And of course, in other movements like handstands and skills performed directly on the floor, it isn't really possible to have a neutral wrist position, which again can be straining over time. But that's where parallettes come in. Essentially, this tool is a way to continue having a neutral wrist position by adding a slight elevation. This way you can apply the exact same principle as with the dip bars. And oftentimes, just alternating between using the floor and using parallettes can be enough relief to continue doing both. The shoulder is a very complex joint, and there are many ways it can get injured. A big reason is flaring the elbows outwards during pull-ups. This happens when the grip is too narrow or when pulling with the arms instead of the back. And it's especially problematic near the top of the pull-up, where it causes the upper arm to press into the shoulder. This narrows the space inside the joint and increases the risk of tendons getting pinched. On top of that, it also removes engagement from the lats and lower traps. Your arms may feel more in control, but your shoulders are taking a heavier load while losing the bigger and more capable back muscles. And even if you don't feel any pain right away, it builds up over time, sometimes only detectable after months. Not from one big injury, but from bad technique repeated over and over. So the key here is to keep the elbows tucked and pointing down, which typically is easier with a wider grip. And if you're suspecting that you're pulling mainly with your arms, then you can watch my video on how to activate your back during pull-ups, linked in the description. Besides pull-ups, there's also a very similar issue in muscle-ups, only this time when landing on the bar. In general, this exercise already puts a lot of stress on the rotator cuffs with its big internal rotation. So you really want to be careful and keep your elbows tucked during the transition. And always avoid chicken wing muscle-ups, as these really put the shoulder in a weak position. Lastly, instability in dips is also a big cause of impingement and injury in the shoulder. However, the fix to create a more stable dip is actually the same technical cue that helps relieve sternum pain later in the video. So stay tuned for that. Bicep tears are brutal and unfortunately far too common in calisthenics. It's probably the muscle group with the highest risk of serious injury, and for good reason, because the bicep is a shared stress point for many of the most demanding movements. The obvious ones are pulling exercises that target the biceps directly, like pull-ups, levers, and rows. However, unlike traditional weightlifting, some pushing exercises also place significant stress on the biceps, notably the planche and handstand pressing. In these movements, the bicep is placed under load in its fully stretched position. This matters because muscles generally are at a higher risk of injury in the weakest and most lengthened state, especially if already fatigued. So if you're doing heavy pulls the first day and following it up with a planche session, well, then the extra stress combined with the arm position can lead to injury. Some people end up unknowingly straining the biceps so frequently that the muscle never gets time to fully recover. But unlike some of the other injuries on this list, there isn't really a quick fix for this one. You'll need to take a closer look at your program and make adjustments if needed. Next is a common mistake that creates unnecessary tension around the neck, often leading to stiffness or minor injury. It's something often overlooked but easily fixed, and again it's related to the pull-up. Generally, it happens because beginners tend to shrug their shoulders and upper traps as they approach the top. And in a way it makes sense, because it feels like raising the shoulders can help you get closer to the bar, but in reality it only creates build-up tension in the surrounding muscles. Instead, try to keep your shoulder blades down while looking up and stretching the neck instead of compressing it. This is one of those mistakes where just getting aware of it is often enough to correct it. Sternum pain is an issue that shows up for some people when performing dips. It's a nagging pain right in the middle of the chest, and especially as you descend into the stretch. And it can be an incredibly frustrating issue, because when it flares up, you're often forced to stop training entirely and recover for a long time. So how do you prevent it? Well, there's a lot of mixed information out there and not all of it works for everyone. But here's a tip I've often heard to be helpful. It's related to the streetlifting dip, the technique used to safely lift the heaviest amounts of added weight. In this version of the dip, the shoulder blades no longer retract and come together. Instead, the dip starts from a protracted position. This moves the shoulder blades away from each other and tucks the chest into a closed position, in contrast to it sticking up and out. The primary benefit of this position is how much stronger and more stable it is when performing weighted dips. It activates the serratus muscle for extra stability and decreases the risk of shoulder impingement. But interestingly, I've received a lot of feedback from my dip tutorial, and it seems to also relieve sternum pain for many of you. So if that's something you've been dealing with, I definitely recommend giving it a try. And if you want a full breakdown of the technique, because there is more to it, then you can check out my dip tutorial yourself, linked in the description. Before ending the video, I'll be quick to mention that if you're looking for some new calisthenics equipment, my sponsors at Gonation have some very high quality options. You can use my code JACOB10 for 10% off. I've put the link in the description. That was it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something new, and I will see you in the next one.